Hello friends, welcome to the session on Operations Planning, Scheduling and Control. I, Dr. Sanket Charkha, take this opportunity to introduce and to teach you this particular module. I have completed my graduation and post-graduation in Commerce, MBA in Finance Specialization and Operations Specialization, and International Business Specialization. I have completed my Masters of Philosophy and Doctors of Philosophy from Savitribai Phule Pune University. I have a teaching experience of more than 9 years in industry and more than 8 years in teaching. Currently, I am working as Assistant Professor and Training and Placement Officer at Savitribai Phule Pune University. So now let's begin with our learning. In this first module, in the first chapter, we'll be understanding and dealing the concept of role of operations in planning in goods and services business. Now let's begin our learning. So what are the learning objectives? From this particular chapter, you will be able to understand and learn what do you mean by operations planning and what are the various activities that have been undertaken in operation planning of goods and services for your business. Now let's begin with our learning. So firstly, we'll understand what do we mean by operations learning. Operations learning is the series of activities and targets that the organization will pursue. Why they will pursue? So that in order to achieve the strategic plans and goals and objectives are outlined in an operational plan. So from this particular definition or the meaning, we can understand that operations planning is a series of activities. So a step-by-step procedure, that is step number 1, step number 2, step number 3. What are the various steps or activities that a company or organization undertakes to achieve a certain target, and that particular target is always a strategic plan which has been decided either for the short-term perspective or for the long-term perspectives. So it is an outlined process of following a certain amount of steps that the organization has to follow, and such planning is called as the operational planning. Operations planning serves as the foundation for companies' day-to-day operations. Now, when we say that operational planning is into existence, what it does, it guides your day-to-day activities or day-to-day processes about how do you undergo or how do you undertake those activities. So, a day plan, a guideline is been given for the day-to-day operational activities that an organization has to undertake. Now, a series of planning of activities may be undertaken over a period of time. That particular period of time may be either a day, a month, a year, a fortnight, or anything. So the operational planning will give you a certain understanding about what steps or what activities you are going to undergo. Operational plan also covers a year's worth of work. So as we have seen earlier, the operational planning also undertakes about what activities we are going to conduct on day-to-day basis. So a combination of activities which has been undertaken for day-to-day basis, it combines for a month, for a particular period, for a particular 6 months, and for a particular year. So for the entire year purpose also, the operational planning activity can be undertaken. Now let's understand what are the various procedures or activities that have been performed in an operational plan. The first step or the beginning of the operational planning is developing or monitoring a plan. So initially, what do we have to do? We have to develop or we have to look for a plan that needs to be developed. So initially, whenever you start a strategic business objective, whenever you have a strategic goal associated with a particular business or a series of activities that you need to undergo, you need to develop and you need to monitor a plan. And that particular plan should be available on a paper, and accordingly you need to note down what activities you are going to perform. The second step in the activities or the procedure for the operational planning is developing the work plan and the timeline. So accordingly, the series of activities needs to be jotted down on step-by-step basis. But that is, what will be step number 1, what will be step number 2, what will be step number 3, and so on. Followed with this, you should have a certain deadline or you should have a certain timeline. When we say there is a series of activities, those particular series of activities needs to be prepared or needs to be completed in this specified time period. That particular specified time period may be according to the work allocation, according to the job that you have to complete. Now let's take an example, that is you want to manufacture a particular product, and the standard time that has been required for manufacturing a product or for processing or for a certain series of activities is around 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, and so on. So here in this case, the time that we have allocated, that is 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and 5 minutes, is the timeline that you have to decide for the operational planning. So a series of activities, one goods moving to the another moving to the next step, and so on. So in this case, what happened? A timeline is been framed, a deadline is been set, and accordingly the activities are being performed. Then you have to come forward with the development of an operational plan. So when you have monitored a plan, when you have developed the timeline and a work plan has been prepared for you, then you start to prepare a operational plan, or then you start to develop an operational plan for your goods or for your services that is into the business. So here in this case, what do? We actually prepare the operational plan, and then we try to see about which activity, which step, how it has to be fitted into those particular perspectives. So there comes the third important step of actually developing an operational plan. Before developing an operational plan, what do you need to do? We need to be prepared for monitoring the activity, for developing a plan, and then setting a different deadlines or a certain targets for the time perspectives. The next step in procedure or activities that you need to perform in an operational plan is to develop and refine the budget. Initially, you need to prepare a budget, and accordingly, the allocation of resources, allocation of amount needs to be undertaken. And based on the allocation of a certain amount of money, you need to refine the budget also. The budget needs to be refined on the availability of resources, availability of finances, increase or decrease in the working capital requirement, operational activities, and so on. The business performance with respect to sales, revenue, profit margins may increase or may decrease as per the guidelines that have been given by the top management. So, with respect to the availability of finances, one has to see that all those activities have been completed in the specified timeline, the guidelines have been fulfilled, and accordingly, the allocation of money as a resource or the availability of money or funds in the organization are available in the ample amount. So developing and refining the budget is also essentially important. The next step in the procedure or activities that you need to undertake is implementing the action and monitoring. So here in the next, that is the fifth step, you need to actually implement the operational plan that you have executed. So execution takes place at the fifth point, and whenever the execution is being undertaken, simultaneously you need to monitor about how those activities have been performed and whether they have been performing as per the plan that is you have developed, that is in the step number 2. In the step number 2, you have clearly identified the work plan, that which series of activity, which activity will be undertaken at what period, at what time. So accordingly, one has to monitor about which activities have been performing and whether they are performing within the specified time period or not. And hence, we need to monitor the deadline, we need to monitor the timeline, and we have to see that all the series of activities are being conducted in an effective way or not. And lastly, developing the goal, strategic assumptions, and the objectives. So here, in this case, we have to see that when all the series of activities are being completed, whether the target that we were looking for, it is been achieved or it is not been achieved. We have to also monitor, we have to also see that the strategic objective that you were looking for, that is the short-term benefit or the long-term benefit, generation of revenue, profit margin, creation of a certain product, qualitative and quantitative factors, whatever may be the concern, all those things needs to be analyzed, evaluated, and then the performance objective, whether it is been achieved or whether it is not been achieved, that needs to be identified. So that here in this case, we have seen what is the procedure or activities that needs to be performed for developing an effective operational plan. When all these step of activities are being undertaken in the organization in an organized way, in a systematic way, then your operational plan becomes effective and it is successful. Now let's look at the various concepts of good governance practices. So what are the various practices that we have to implement to see that the operational plan that you are implementing or you are operating in a particular business is effective and providing the better results in the organization? The first objective at this particular stage is setting and safeguarding the vision, values, and reputation of the organization. So whatever operational plan that you are preparing, it should be in accordance, in coordination with the vision, mission, values, statement of objectives, and the long-term and short-term goals of the organization. So we have to also see that the operational plan is always an output or a product or a correlation between the strategic goal and the actual goals the company is looking for. So in this case, whenever the business organization is looking for the product or for the services, we have to also see that the operational plan is always set and it is also safeguarding the vision, mission, policy and organizational objectives, whatever they have been set. So always it should be in alignment with the organizational goals, objectives and so on. The rules set out in the governing document. So every company or an organization prepares a governing document, and the governing document of a company or a business firm, it clearly signifies or explains about what activities will be performed by that organization. So in those particular case, we have to see that whatever activities, whatever guidelines have been provided in the governing document, the operational plan that you are trying to implement, the operational plan that we are trying to build, it is in alignment with the governing document. There should not be any contradictory situation, or a clause may not clash or may not be in a contradictory mode with either one of the points in the governing document and in your operational plan that you are preparing. The next good governance practice is the organization's operating environment. The environment is been divided into two parts, either the internal environment or the external environment. So always a good operational plan should always see that the operating environment of a company does not get affected. That is the coordination between the departments, the movement of goods and services from one department to another department, the communication, the documentation, or the follow-up to be taken with the customers, the suppliers, the vendors, and all the participants of the external environment is properly set and it is not been hampered. So maintaining a good operating environment is essentially required. Now let's take an example at this particular stage. For example, there is a certain amount of requirement of goods in on the shop floor. So when there is a requirement of the goods on the shop floor, the invoice or the order has to be generated from the shop floor to the inventory or to the stores department. So in this case, if the order is being generated, it is the duty of the stores department to provide the quantity or quality of goods and services on specified time period. So within the deadline, the stores department has to see that the goods are being delivered to the respective stores or the manufacturing or the shop floor department, and accordingly the goods are in a transit or in a position. So in this case, it is the coordination of activities by all the departments together for seeing that the operating environment is effective. So that's formed the part of good governance practice. Overseeing the work of the organization. So here in this case, we have to also see that the work organization culture is also very effective and all the activities are being undertaken in an effective way. So here in this case, overseeing the organizational objectives is not needed to be taken into account. That is, always we have to see that whatever objectives, whatever plans, mission and goals of the organization are into existence, those particular plans, objectives or goals and are always being set and they are in coordination or in alignment with the long-term and short-term objectives what the company is been aiming for. And lastly, the legal duties. That is the legal duties of the members or the participants of the organization, how they are performing their legal duties, what are the various documentation that one has to maintain, and what are the various steps that needs to be undertaken for the effective governance. So here in this case, we need to keep into mind or we need to keep into account that the vision, mission, policy, long-term objectives, short-term objectives, the environment of a particular business, either the internal environment or the external environment, the governing document or the policy document of the company, and all the legal formalities are being complied in a very effective way. And then only we can say that the plan that we have prepared with respect to the operational activities is good, qualitative and effective. Now let's see what do you actually mean by operational plan. So as we have seen earlier, the operational plan is the series of activities and targets the organization will pursue in order to achieve the strategic plans or goals. So these particular strategic plans or goals are outlined in the operational plan. So the operational plan will give you a clear understanding about what the company or what the department or what the series of activities is aiming for. That is, increase in the profitability, increase in the production, increase in the quality of product, increase in the market share, increase in the quantitative terms, and so on. So whatever may be the objective of that particular firm, the activities are needed to be set, they are needed to be pre-decided, and accordingly the target needs to be set by the organization about how production activity needs to be undertaken. It serves as the foundation for the company's day-to-day operations. So the day-to-day operational activities are sequentially guided and they have been operated with the help of operations plan that is into existence. So The operational plan will give you understanding, will give you information about what activities we are conducting, how they have been conducted and coordinated, and in what way those operational activities are needed to be undertaken. An operational plan also covers years of work. An annual operational plan should be a backup as a strategic plan. So here in this case, we need to understand that whatever operational plan that you are preparing, it should be always in the alignment of your annual budget or annual activities that you are going to undertake. So those particular activities which you are conducting for the day-to-day basis or for annual basis, it should be conducted over a period of time, and there should be a proper series or sequence of activities that needs to be undertaken. The senior staff personnel, wherever we say that there are paid workers, will typically design these particular operational activities and they will authorize the management committee. So in this case, whenever we are designing or whenever we are preparing the operational plan, it is the need, it needs to be that we should be taking utmost care that skilled people and talented people or the good qualitative people are being hired, and they are the participants of the designing and development of an operational plan. So that we can see that all the activities are in coordination with your vision, mission, quality, policy, governing documents, the legal formalities, and so on. So there should not be any discrepancy or loophole whenever we are preparing or whenever we are designing an operational plan. And hence, the senior staff personnel of the organization should be deputed for the development of the operational plan, and the consultancy, whatever is been required, should be undertaken from the top management. Now let's look at the application of operational plan. So in this case, we can understand or we can see that the operational plan can be applied to various disciplines, and those particular disciplines are the marketing, the finance, the operations, the materials, the distribution chain, the engineering, and lastly, the human resource. So here at every stage, the operational plan can be applied for various disciplines. In terms of marketing, for coordination of production activities, the operational plan needs to be undertaken. For the coordination of the financial activities, that is availability of budget, increase or decrease in the finances, availability of resources, short-term and long-term sources of finance either from the internal source or from the external sources, everything needs to be taken into account, and then the availability of money, availability of funds is needed to be undertaken. With respect to the operational activities, that is what amount of goods, what amount of services, what amount of raw material, all those questions needs to be answered, and then the operational activities or operational decision needs to be undertaken. What is your target? What manufacturing activities needed to be undertaken? How many goods has to be manufactured, and so on. With respect to the materials, the proper system needs to be there into place for the material handling system, that what quality, what quantity, and what type of products or the raw materials are being required, and how do we look forward for the preparation of materials. With respect to the engineering activities, one operational plan should specify or should clarify about what are the various engineering technologies that you're going to implement, and over a period of time, what series of activities needs to be implemented. If you need to import a certain technology, if you need to implement a certain tools and techniques for production, all those activities is needed to be taken into account, and then accordingly the operational planning activities are needed to be guided or it needs to be forwarded. And lastly, the human resources. Human resource is a part wherein the amount of labor, either the skilled labor or the unskilled labor will be required, and how do you implement or how do you employ those resources as a human being for the creation of the successful operational plan. So here in this case, it is a well coordinated activities of all the disciplines, either maybe it related to marketing, finance, operations, materials, human resource, operations, materials, engineering sciences, and so on. Now let's understand how do we emphasize the operational plan. The operational plan emphasizes the decisions that have been taken by the management committee and what they are aiming for. The aim for the management is to achieve the strategic goals or strategic objectives. Those particular objectives may be either the long term or the short term. And these particular objectives are always in align with the vision, mission, policy, and framework of the business that has been set or it has been decided. So the operational plan should always be in connection with the strategic planning that has been undertaken and what the company is aiming either in the short term period or in the long term period. The budget for the organization should be tightly linked to the operational strategy. So here When we are preparing a budget for the operational plan, the coordination between the finance department and the operations department, the availability of funds, availability of money as a part of a resource should be made available, and accordingly we have to see that those resources are equally available and provided by the respective departments. No use of having a big operational strategy if you don't have the means to carry out. So if you feel at any point that the operational plan that you have prepared is not feasible to be implemented, is not perfect, that needs to be aligned, then accordingly such plan should not be accepted and it should not be implemented in the organization. And hence the big operational strategy, if it is of a nature that it cannot be implemented or if it is not feasible to the organization, such plan or such project should not be accepted, and hence these particular techniques needs to be avoided. And hence it is necessary to see that whether the operational plan that you have prepared is acceptable or it is not acceptable. And lastly, the budget of the organization should be regularly monitored throughout the year. So whatever the budget, whatever finances that have been allocated, one has to monitor that whatever funds that you are applying or whatever funds that you are employing for running the successful of the operational plan, they are being utilized in an effective way, and accordingly the funds are being procured, they are being put to use in effective way. So a proper monitoring of activities for the financial concern, availability of funds, availability of money, deployment of resources, everything needs to be in a proper, well organized and designed way, and every activity should be conducted in the sequence or within the specified deadline. Now let's summarize what we have learned at this particular stage. Operations planning or operations management is indeed the business function in charge of overseeing the manufacturing and distribution. So what we are looking for? We are looking for the business function of overseeing the activities of production. Apart from the regular activity of production, apart from the regular activity of manufacturing or supplying or distributing, we have to see that the operational activities are always aligned in qualitative and quantitative terms. Whatever we are trying to prepare, whatever we are trying to manufacture, whatever we are trying to produce, it should be produced in a well organized way, and accordingly a sequence of activities needs to be planned. Those particular sequence or series of activities should always be in alignment with the short-term and the long-term goals and the strategic objectives of the firm. And lastly, it entails the coordinating, planning, organizing, and controlling of the resources that have been required for generating a company's revenue in terms of either goods or either in terms of services. So here in this case, we have to see that all the functions of management, that is with respect to planning, organizing, directing, staffing, coordinating, decision making, and so on, all the principles and the functions of management are being effectively employed, and the production or the manufacturing activity that you are undertaking is quite effective and quite fruitful, which will provide to the benefit to the organization in the short term and will give the fruits of it in the long term scenario. And hence we can say that whatever plan that you are preparing, that is a operational plan that is been prepared by the management or by the organization or by the skilled personnel of the staff members, it is quite effective and providing benefits to the organization. Now let's quickly summarize what we have learned in this particular session. In this particular session, we have learned that what do you mean by an operational plan? We have defined or we have understood the meaning of an operational plan. Then we have seen which planning is required in planning of goods and services. So with respect to the step-by-step activity, that is step number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, we have seen what are the various steps or what are the various activities that one has to follow and how an operational plan can be implemented in an organization. And lastly, implementing the operational plan, that is when an operational plan is being prepared, how do you implement or how do you incorporate the plan in your day-to-day activities. This particular plan that you have prepared may be implemented for a day, for a particular period, or for the annual period. So that's the composition of the operational plan. And lastly, we have also seen the emphasis of the operational plan in the industrial perspective. That is, if you want to implement this particular plan in an industry, how you are going to implement or how you are going to apply to the industry. Thank you for your patience listening. Thank you.